Morning and welcome to No Second Season. It's around the last week in May at the moment, so it's several weeks since you last saw me. How my cough progressed was it got worse and worse to a point where I couldn't breathe. It lasted 6 weeks from start to finish. In the end, a friend had to take me to the doctors and she gave me my third different antibiotic and an inhaler. And after that, it eased. But it did get to a point where I couldn't breathe. I had no room in my lungs at all to breathe. The doctor thinks it was COVID, but I wasn't tested, which to me seems silly that she would probably put down my notes as a COVID case when they don't even know if it was COVID or not. I hope to get a test at some point to see if I've got the antibodies, to see if it was that. But I'm not sure it was. Anyway, I've finished my work now. Today I decided to bleed the brakes on Bay. Bay is my specialised camber. So let's have a look at it. So today I'm going to only bleed the rear brake on my bike. I don't have much brake fluid, and it's really important to know that Shimano and SRAM use different brake fluids. So Shimano uses this pink one, which is a mineral-based oil. I wouldn't use any alternatives. Get the right stuff unless it's an emergency situation, because otherwise you will ruin your system eventually. So I've removed the rear wheel. I've removed the brake pads. As you can see, I don't have a fancy stand, so I've found this in the garden, this piece of wood, and I've improvised. So the pads are out. I don't have a block to space the pistons. I found this handy piece of wood, so I'm hoping I can jam. Yeah, that's it. So that's jammed the pistons apart to make sure that they don't pop out of the caliper. That would be a nightmare, a complete nightmare. So always jam your pistons. Now with the pads, I've laid them out to the correct sides they came out. It's important to put them back in the caliper the same way they come out, because they're bedded into the disc, and the discs will have different grooves and striations from how it's bedded in. So always put them back the right way. I didn't buy the proper bleed kits for SRAM and Shimano because I've got different bikes with different brakes and I can't afford that. So I bought this sort of universal one. It's called EPC Brake Bleeding Solutions Universal Bleed Kit. So I have to improvise here and there, but I know it works because I've bled Stumpy's brakes and Desmond's brakes before, and they were fine. So let's have a look what I've done up at the master cylinder. One thing to check before you start opening the master cylinder and opening the caliper is that you're doing the right end, that you're doing the rear lever and you're at the rear caliper. I know it sounds obvious. But I've done it the wrong way before, and I thought, why is the fluid not moving? Anyway, so up this end, I've removed the small cap from the cylinder, and I've screwed this in. In the proper kit, this is like a little cup sort of thing, not a syringe housing, but it does the job. Anyway, so this has allowed me to push the pistons back in the caliper a bit further. So this kit hasn't got a perfect solution to fit onto my rear caliper. This little shiny aluminium outlet here is where the tube needs to go. I've removed the rubber bung, and I haven't got the perfect solution, but we can get by. Now, it's really important when you're doing anything mechanical, anything at all, is to be as clean as you can be. Keep everything you're assembling clean. Make sure it assembles nice and correctly with the lubricants, etc., that are recommended. I've also put some gloves on. I normally wouldn't bother if I didn't have some handy, but I did. So I've drawn the fluid in here, I've let it rest, and I've also squeezed out all the air. There is no air in there now at all. There's a little bit in the end here, which I'll push out when I need to. So make sure everything's nice and clean. It's good to have a handy rag around when you're doing this. So I've just discovered that I need to remove this caliper bolt. This is how they make calipers cheaper. The bleed nipple itself doesn't unscrew like a normal one would. There's a screw down here, but you can't get at it without taking this out. So we'll remove the caliper bolt. I'm leaving the other one in, so shouldn't be any dramas. And then I need to get at this one here. I'm just hoping I've got the right size Allen key. I got these Allen keys. They're Stanley ones. I thought I'd lost mine when I left Australia. I got home, couldn't find them. I found them now. But anyway, in the meantime, I'd bought these. They were £5 off Amazon. And they're a bit too heavy to take bike packing, but it's handy to have a set at home anyway. So I'm going to crack this open till a tiny bit of fluid comes out like that. So there's going to be no air in it. And then I'm going to push the rest of the air out of my tube, keep squeezing it so there's no air getting in, and fix it like that onto the bleed nipple. And now I'm going to push some fluid through. I need to now I can undo the bleed screw a bit more. And start pushing some fluid through. And we can see at the other end it's rising in here as I push. It's not dirty at all, actually. So it was a little bit dirty. So there's some new fluid coming through, the pink stuff. So I think that'll do me. So we need to tighten this bleed screw. So it's basically what you need to do is keep fluid in everything and don't let any air in, all the way from here into the caliper, through the brake line, all the way up to the master cylinder. Just keep fluid in it and no air, and you shouldn't go wrong. Now this is specific to this bike, and I'm hoping, so a little bit of a, haven't got a torque wrench, so a bit of a nip. Clean up any brake fluid. Anyway, so now let's put it back together. The caliper bolt, give it a clean, get any grit off it. It's still got its Loctite on it, so I'm not worried about that. And I always check my caliper bolts when I do a before ride check. I check my caliper bolts often because they're the things that do come loose, and I'll leave it loose because what I'm going to do is centre them on the disc once I've got the wheel on. So I'm just going to leave it loose. I'll know it's loose, don't worry, I'm not going to forget. And then make sure it's clean around here, squirt a bit of water on it. I'm actually going to squirt a bit of brake cleaner because I haven't got a water squirter. and put the dust cap back on. And don't get any shit in the nipple. So that's that. So this is what we've got up this end. Fluid all the way, no air. And this universal kit has got this handy thing for clamping the pipe up. So when I remove this now, not too much fluid will be deposited. Be very careful with this fluid. Don't throw it down the drain. It needs disposing of properly. It's nasty stuff. Now this is hard. With a camera in my hand, I'm going to remove this and catch the fluid that comes out. So excuse me if this is a bit cack-handed. So drain the rest of the fluid out of there, and we've got fluid in the master cylinder. I'm so glad I didn't need to buy any. I could actually do my front, but I don't know, I might do the front as well. Anyway, there's a little cap with an O-ring that screws into the master cylinder, so you need to make sure you've got the O-ring. Make sure it's not got any grit or dirt on it. And place that back in. Easier said than done. And again, a little nip to do that up. What is really handy when you've got to work in a mess like this, and you haven't got that nice park tool man den or woman den to work in, a nice workshop, and you're working in a messy environment, use the cap of your brake cleaner bottle and put everything you take off in it and put it away from where you can kick it. I just kicked it a while ago. You live and learn. So now I'll pop the pads back in, and we'll see if we've got a good brake pedal, as I like to call it. I know it's a lever, but coming from a car background, it's a pedal. So make sure there's no brake fluid around the caliper. I've just washed this down, and then pop your pads in. It's a bit tricky actually with the bike at this angle. Can't quite see what I'm doing. And pop the split pin back in, like so. And give it a little kink. So make sure you pop your wheel in before you try your lever. So you put your pads in, there's no spacer in there. If you try your lever now, the pads are gonna, the pistons are gonna come right out. And if your pads are very thin, you may pop them. I think it's unlikely. I've never done any, and I make mistakes. So I like a lot of travel on my lever. There's an adjuster screw here, so I have it quite a way out, and that's got a nice hard push against the hydraulic fluid, so that feels good. When it comes to brake bleeding, all bikes are different. Different brakes are different as well, even Shimano. So the Shimano ones on my stump jumper have different calipers to the Shimano on this Specialized Camber. They're the same make of bike, but they have different Shimano brakes, and you'll have to adapt it for your bike. So what I would suggest is go online, go on YouTube, and check out how to do your type of brakes. So often you hear you shouldn't have your bike upside down because it will ruin your brakes. Now, in my experience with Bay particularly, it doesn't seem so bad with Stumpy, the brakes on Stumpy or Desmond, but on Bay, if I have him upside down and then turn him upright and pull the lever goes right to the bar. and this is because the air has travelled all the way up to the caliper. But once you've left it standing upright for some time, the air comes back up to the master cylinder, if there is any in it, and everything will be fine after that. So you may ride a bike with cable brakes. Now, people are often wary of hydraulic brakes if they haven't been, say, a mountain biker, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with hydraulic brakes. They're very reliable. I can go perhaps 3 years without changing my fluid, and then still the brakes work. I haven't ever had a time when a seal has gone or anything like that, so I think they're pretty reliable. So if you was umming and ahhing whether to go for a bike with them, just go for it. If you're wondering what bleeding the brakes is all about, basically hydraulic brakes are just like a cable, but the cable's made of fluid, and so that fluid can't be compressible. It needs to be rigid, and clean brake fluid will be completely rigid. Now, if for instance you've got, not that you're going to, they are so reliable. I haven't ever really needed to bleed my brakes, but say they get water in or air in or contaminants, and those items are compressible, then you'd get a spongy lever. So bleeding them, basically you're just flushing through clean fluid. As I say, it's not something you need to do very often. I've took out this axle and I've lubricated it, cleaned out where it seats because it was corroding. Although it's aluminium, there was some corrosion happening, so I've cleaned it out and applied some grease, and I've tightened the wheel up. So as you can see, the bike is upside down at the moment. Just making sure everything looks good. Now, one job I will do before I go bike packing again is I will replace the chain. It's looking a bit shabby and it's not worth, I can't have the extra weight of carrying a spare one, so I'll put a decent one on there at some point. Now, I don't know if you know, on this specific derailleur, when you're taking your wheel out, this is its normal position. You have the chain on the smallest cog, and there's a button here with a lock on it, and you push that button. So I push the button and it holds it in a position that enables you to get the wheel out, but always remember to release it before you go to ride. Yeah, the chain is looking a bit shabby, so we'll get a new one. Now I'm just going to take my pedals off, and I'm going to put some grease on the threads, just to make sure they don't seize up at an inopportune moment, because you do have to remove them to travel, to fly. So I'll do that now. You've got a left-hand thread on the left-hand side of the bike. This is the right-hand side, so it's a normal thread, anti-clockwise to undo, like that. On the left-hand pedal, it'll be a left-hand thread, which means it does up anti-clockwise and it undoes clockwise. So to get this off, I need to crack it clockwise. I just want to wind them out a bit so I can put a bit of lube in there. If I had some copper slip, I'd be putting copper slip on them. I've got some at my lock-up unit. I haven't got any here. A little bit of PTFE lubricant won't do it any harm. So I'm just going to put a little bit of lube there, and in the back of the threads, then tighten them back up. So this will go clockwise to do up. And again, just a little crack. that's all I ever do. I've not had a problem. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but that's what I do. I don't know what it's like where you come from, but in mountain biking, there's a lot of snobbery over pedals. But do you know what? Since I've had Bay, he come with cheap plastic pedals, and I've done a lot of miles on him. I've still got the plastic pedals, specialised plastic pedals that it come with. They're a bit battered, but my feet don't slip. And when you hit your shins, it's not quite as bad as those metal ones. It doesn't dig such a deep hole. So plastic pedals for the specialised camber seem fine to me. So before I adjust my calipers, you need to make sure your wheels are done up properly. They're in the correct position and tight as you're going to run them. If you've got a maxle or an axle like this, where it goes into a slot just here there's a slot and it turns like this. Now I just do mine up with a little nip, literally with one hand, like so, and then you should be able to adjust this or move it so then it tightens, goes over centre, and I always keep it up here against the fork. Now this is too loose, so what I need to do is tighten it. If you look in here, so this screw in here, it's a 2.5mm. So when you buy an Allen key set, make sure you get the 2.5mm, because not all kits have a 2.5mm, and it's on a little ratchet in here. And so you turn it onto the next, as clockwise I've just done it, and actually there, that's perfect. So it's tight, it's not going to fall open, but it's not too tight that you're going to have to break your fingers undoing it. So one click has tightened that up, but as I say, 2.5mm. Make sure your kit has a 2.5mm in it, because these do come loose. I don't know how or why, but they do. So that's my wheels tight. So without moving the calipers, I'm now going to tighten the caliper bolts. Hopefully they're centered correctly. I don't know what the official procedure is. I just settle them, tighten the wheels, settle everything, pull the brakes, let them go, don't touch anything, and do them up. Now when I'm talking about undoing caliper bolts to center them, do not ever undo these ones that join the two halves of the caliper together. So it will be cast and then machined, and then it will be properly joined and sealed at the factory. These ones that join it together, you must never undo. It's the ones that mount it to the bike, not the ones that mount to the frame, but the bolts that mount the caliper to the bike. So never undo these. Ever, ever? Never, ever. Ever, ever. I don't know what the official torque figure is. I give them a full hand 90-degree pull, and that seems to do the job. So we'll do the rears as well. Sounds good to me. They're turning nice and freely. So that's how I do it. It will be different for every bike. This is just how I do it. I'm not telling you it's the same for your bike, but these are jobs that I do just to make sure that I'm maintaining it as best I can with my limited resources. So I have 3 specialised bikes. I've got this 2017 Camber called Bay, I've got a 2015 Stump Jumper called Stumpy, and I've got a 2016 Demo 8 downhill bike. They're all specialised, they're all quite expensive, but you know, these bikes, touch wood, just never seem to break. They're really well put together, and for me it's worth the extra cost. What I've put this bike through, Bay, just on the Altravesur alone, dragging it up and down mountains by its pedals or by its handlebars with it laying on the ground, falling, the big accident I had, but also when I fell down an embankment and it caught the bike very heavily on a tree. There's no problems with the bike whatsoever. You just get back up and ride. And not all bikes would be this good. And just looking at the bottom bracket, I was thinking, oh, there's bound to be some play in it. And do you know what? There's no play. Nothing. Zero, zilch. There is no play at all. Perhaps a few thou. So when you're buying a bike, buy the best, not the most expensive, but the best spec you can afford. Having good kit on them will pay dividends, especially if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you have some sort of accident. The chances of it surviving that accident are going to be better if you've got high spec equipment on it. I know not everyone can afford it, and I couldn't now. I'm not working now, so these are my last bikes, I suspect. You might have noticed that I bought a new pump. I don't like keep using Amazon, but through this lockdown, although the local bike shop delivered me some bits, I didn't like to keep pestering them, to be honest. And I haven't been out. So in 2 months, I've been out the house twice. So it's, it's called Pro Bike Tool. And it comes in all sorts of colours. It's lightweight, it's aluminium. It's quite nice, seems to pump the tyres up well. It does Presta and Schrader valves. It has in the top, you unscrew the hose, the adapter. It tells you Schrader that end, Presta that end. So the other end, I want Presta, so I screw the Schrader end into here and push it on tightly onto the undone valve and pump it up. And there's a built-in gauge here. This stiff bit, the hose is a bit short for my liking, a little bit short, because this stiff bit obviously doesn't bend, but it's a gauge, and as you can see, as it pumps up, it expands and tells you the pressure. Now I'll see how that goes on my next bike packing tour, and I'll let you know. It comes with a bracket to fit into the bike, so I've oh, that flew off. These are my monkey cage brackets, and I've screwed the bracket that comes with the pump underneath those, so I can have a bottle and a pump on my frame, which I've never had before. This is the monkey cage. Now this survived the accident, in fact both accidents. You can put a large bottle on it as big as, you know, this will allow, so a litre easily, and the space, obviously I haven't got much room, so that's quite handy, and it survived all right. It has dust caps on both ends, so to keep the dirt out. This hairband around it because I'm worried it's going to clatter and be noisy on the frame, so we'll see how that goes. I might need to put something a little more substantial around it, and there's a little strap here to tighten it up. Now I am slightly worried about, because it still can move a little bit, so perhaps you should put it on these on this slightly knurled surface to give it more grip, like that, perhaps. But yeah, with this on here, it's not gonna damage or make a racket. That's what I was really worried about. So that's my new pump. Dampers, I'm not going to service them this time, or the forks. There's no leaks. I don't think the guy had let the air out for me to ship it back to this country, so I hope it hasn't damaged anything, but they feel all right, so we'll see how that goes. So apart from just sorting out my cockpit, I just need to tighten up the brake levers and the gear change lever, and I also need to put the sealant in my tyres, but because that has a shelf life once it's in the tyres, I'm not going to do it until I know I'm going to ride. And although I could go out and ride around Banbury in the local trails, I've kind of got it in my mind that I just want to prepare it for my next bikepacking tour. I want to tour with a freshly serviced bike, and I don't want to service it again before I go, so I might not ride, although I'm quite tempted to. Now I'm not working, so we will see what happens there. But yeah, he's kind of ready to go now. Oh dear. What a mess the country's in, isn't it? I just hope some borders open soon. It's a nightmare. Anyway, let's get on and do a few more jobs. So one thing I've noticed, as you might know, I use my bike luggage for bike packing is roll packers. So I have a roll packer 25 front and rear, and you can see that it's rubbing on my seat post where it mounts around here. So it clamps around here with a Velcro strap, plastic clip and Velcro strap. And also I'm getting the same on my handlebars. Again, plastic clip with Velcro straps. Slightly concerned about this. You know, is it a stress raiser? How thick are these? Slightly concerned. Now, I did break a roll packer front bracket on my last tour. They replaced it free of charge. I just had to pay the carriage, and it come immediately. Same with my gorilla cage that got swallowed by my wheel. They replaced that free of charge as well, and very quickly. But yeah, I'm slightly concerned about the damage the roll packer brackets are doing. Perhaps it's how I'm using them. Perhaps I'm putting too much weight on them, or perhaps they just do that. But a slight concern. Perhaps I need a bit of padding under it, or even some lubrication. No, it'll move if I put lubrication on there. So not sure what to do about that. I might just risk it and see what happens, see if it ends in disaster, because that is my life. Yeah, I just fall from one to another. Is how it goes, I think. In the UK at the moment, we're still in lockdown. We're not allowed to go and stay anywhere overnight. We're not allowed round other people's houses. So it's still quite strict. And as soon as they'll just open the borders anywhere I can go, I'm going to go bike packing as I finished work. I don't have an awful lot of money, but I'll go bike packing. Otherwise, if they don't open borders to the British, because we've had COVID so bad, I may have to bike pack in this country. But it's been like this, blue skies, for weeks and weeks, probably about 6 weeks. It's been sunny with the odd rainy day. It would have been great to go bike packing, but we're not allowed to, and I don't want to get arrested. So that's the brakes done, and Bay's on his way to going on an adventure. I'd like to thank everyone that's subscribed to my channel, or anyone that watches my videos. If you haven't subscribed yet, even if you don't want to watch lots of them, it'd be really nice if you did, because I don't have many subscribers, and it would be really nice. So if you could hit the button, and if you want notifications of when I make a new video, you have to hit the little bell as well, so please do that. I shall close this episode here. I hope you're all having a safe lockdown, or whatever your country is doing, and I'll be seeing you soon. Bye for now. Nous commençons par les
bars